Here are the biggest gaming leaks and news you've probably missed this week. Okay, let's talk about something I've seen a lot in the comments lately. Every time I bring up the idea that PlayStation prices might go up, people start jumping in like, ha, you were wrong. Look, it's cheaper now on Amazon. And honestly, I get where they're coming from, but that take is a bit short-sighted. Let me explain. So, first things first. Yes, there are sales right now. You go on Amazon, Walmart, wherever, and you'll see PlayStation 5 bundles going for less than usual. But before you pop the champagne and call me out, let's actually understand why this is happening. Companies don't just drop prices randomly out of kindness. This is end of quarter 2 behavior. Q2 stands for the second quarter of the fiscal year, April to June. And guess what? Q2 ends in just a few weeks. So what does that mean? It means Sony, and honestly, every other major company is doing what they always do at this time, pushing sales numbers to hit targets. Because you know what happens if those targets aren't met? Shareholders aren't happy, and CEOs don't get bonuses. We're talking millions in incentives riding on those numbers. So yeah, that sweet $449 bundle. It's not a sign prices are dropping forever. It's a short-term sales tactic to look good on the books. It's marketing strategy 101. Does that make sense? Now here's the part people keep skipping. Global pricing. Just because prices haven't gone up in the US yet doesn't mean they haven't gone up elsewhere. Sony already raised prices in Canada, the UK, Japan, Brazil, and a bunch of other countries. They even hiked the price of PlayStation Plus globally. So if you're only looking at the US, you're literally ignoring half the chessboard. And here's where it gets even more real. Trump's tariff policy. The man is making noise about slapping new tariffs on imported electronics from China. And like it or not, a lot of PlayStation components, or the whole system, are tied to that supply chain. So if those tariffs go through, it's going to cost Sony more to bring PS5s into the US. What do you think they'll do? Eat the cost? No, they'll pass it on to us. Higher prices, simple as that. Let me put it another way. Right now, we're in a calm before the storm. These sales are like a sunny day before the rain hits. You're out there saying, see, no rain. Meanwhile, I'm pointing to the clouds building up and going, bro, maybe grab an umbrella. Now to Sony's credit, they've been the last man standing when it comes to US price hikes. Xbox raised prices. Meta did too. Even Nintendo shifted some prices around. But Sony, they've held the line. That's actually commendable. But don't confuse holding off with never going to happen. If the tariffs pass, or if inflation keeps squeezing profits, Sony's going to have no choice. It's basic economics. So when I say prices will go up, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon, I'm not pulling that out of thin air. I'm looking at market trends, political shifts, corporate patterns. I'm looking at the full puzzle, not just one corner. So yeah, enjoy the sales. Grab the bundle, celebrate if you want, but don't act like a limited time Q2 promotion somehow debunks months of real-world indicators. That's like saying, it's cold today, so climate change must be fake. So here's the deal with Helldivers 2 and why your ideas for new stuff haven't popped up yet. Johan Pilestedt, the boss at Arrowhead, dropped some real talk about how fans want new content non-stop, but game development isn't as simple as hitting an add button. Players often throw out suggestions like, can't they just add this or that? But Johan points out it's way more complicated. What looks easy from the outside can totally mess up other parts of the game. It's like a chain reaction. Change one thing and suddenly a bunch of other things need fixing. Unless you've worked on games, it's hard to get how much work goes into these features. For example, adding permanent Thief soldiers in Helldivers 2 isn't just copying some code. The devs have to tweak difficulty, redesign missions, and make sure the game still feels right. It's a big deal. Johan uses a cool movie comparison. In films, you just tell actors what to say, but in games, you have to build the actors from scratch before they can even perform. So adding new weapons, enemies, or planets means tons of testing, balancing, and coding. Then there's the whole live service problem. Players want constant updates faster than devs can deliver. This creates pressure and unrealistic expectations. Other devs agree, saying players often think stuff is easy just because they see some basic tools online. But real game making is a beast. Arrowhead's strategy is to drop big, quality updates instead of flooding the game with small, rushed stuff. That way, devs avoid burnout and the game stays solid. Rushing just to keep fans happy can lead to crunch and worse games overall. overall. So, what do you think? Is patience really key when it comes to game updates? Let me know your thoughts. I'm curious if fans can chill a bit and let devs do their thing without pushing for everything right now. So, we all know the Xbox Games Showcase 2025 is coming up soon on June 8th, right? But here's something new. Xbox just confirmed they're an official partner for this year's Summer Game Fest too. That's a big deal. If you didn't know, Summer Game Fest, often called SGF, is basically the new E3. It's run every summer by Jeff Keighley, the guy who hosts the Game Awards. This year, it kicks off with a big showcase on June 6th, and then there's an industry event the weekend after, where we get tons of early looks and impressions on upcoming games. Now, Microsoft will probably save their biggest announcements for the Xbox Games Showcase on June 8th. But honestly, with how much Team Green is working on lately, there's a good chance they'll tease or reveal something cool at Summer Game Fest beforehand. So we shouldn't sleep on that. You can bet we'll be covering all the big news from these summer events, from Summer Game Fest right through to the Xbox Games Showcase and everything else popping up between. So yeah, grab your popcorn, because even though E3 is gone, the summer gaming hype is definitely still alive and kicking. So, big news from CD Projekt Red. Cyberpunk 2 is officially in pre-production. That means the studio is in the early creative phase, figuring out ideas, designs, and the basics before they start building the full game. This info came out in an investor presentation where they simply stated Cyberpunk 2 has entered pre-production. Not much detail yet, but it's a solid confirmation the sequel is underway. Now, fun fact, CDPR is still calling it Cyberpunk 2 publicly, not Cyberpunk 2078 or anything fancy. This is probably on purpose to keep the setting and story under wraps. The original Cyberpunk author, Mike Pondsmith, did say the sequel will take place in a new location besides Night City, but that's about all we know. So fans are still guessing what kind of world and story we're getting next. It's worth pointing out that pre-production isn't the same as full production. Pre-production is mostly about brainstorming, testing ideas, and setting the direction. It can last years without any actual game content being made yet. Meanwhile, The Witcher 4, the studio's other big project, is already in full production, meaning they're deep into building the game itself. CDPR even opened a new studio in the US dedicated to Cyberpunk 2 to make sure it doesn't slow down The Witcher 4's development. So while Cyberpunk 2 is starting its journey, we're probably a long way off from playing it. Speaking of The Witcher, here's something cool. The Witcher 3 just hit 60 million copies sold. That's huge because it puts the game ahead of legends like Overwatch and even Super Mario Bros. In terms of all-time sales. This milestone comes right after the game's 10th anniversary celebrations, which is perfect timing for CD Projekt to flex just how big that game still is. So, while we're waiting on Cyberpunk 2 and speculating about its new setting and story, The Witcher 3 keeps reminding everyone it's a modern classic that's only growing stronger. Meanwhile, The Witcher 4's production means we'll probably see new adventures in that world before Cyberpunk 2 finally drops. So, here's the scoop. The Witcher 4 was always meant to have CIRI as the main character. This isn't some last-minute decision. It's actually been planned for over a decade. When The Witcher 3 wrapped up Geralt's story in the Blood and Wine DLC, it was clear Geralt's journey was done, but the devs already had their eyes set on CIRI for the next big adventure. Back in 2014, the idea was floating around that she'd be the star of the next game. In Witcher 3, Geralt's basically playing a supporting role, helping CIRI, and that set the stage for her to step into the spotlight. Geralt's voice actor, Doug Cockle, recently jumped in to shut down anyone calling this woke. He says, "There's nothing woke about it," and that CIRI is just a badass character with tons of story potential. If you've read the books, you know there's a whole rich world to explore with her that wasn't fully touched on in Witcher 3 because the story was Geralt's. On top of that, The Witcher 4's director, Sebastian Kalemba, teased that romance will be part of the game, and your choices as CIRI will really matter. The trailer hints at events that might change depending on what you do in the game, so it sounds like a more personal, player-driven story. While The Witcher 4 doesn't have a release date yet, the hype is building. To celebrate The Witcher 3's 10th anniversary, Xbox even dropped a special edition Witcher controller. So yeah, the next chapter's coming, and it's gonna put CIRI front and center. So guess what? The Last of Us Part 2 saw a pretty big sales boost thanks to the second season of the HBO show. Chris Colombo mentioned that The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered sold around 2 million copies during the time Season 2 was airing. The remastered version came out on PS5 back in January 2024 and hit PC in April 2025, right before Season 2 started. On Steam, the PC version even hit a peak of over 30,000 players at once, which is pretty solid. We don't have exact numbers for PS5 sales though, since Sony hasn't shared that info. HBO. Season 2 of the show wrapped up recently with 7 episodes on HBO and Max. Even though millions watched, the finale's viewers dropped by about 55% compared to Season 1's finale. But HBO thinks those numbers will bounce back because the finale aired on a holiday weekend in both the US and UK. Overall, the show still pulls around 37 million viewers per episode, so it's doing great. Sony hasn't officially confirmed the sales boost yet, but Insider Gaming reached out to them. If they say anything, it'll get added to the story. So what do you think about the show giving the game's sales a second wind? Drop your thoughts below. Oh, here's something you might not know. The Order 1886, that PlayStation 4 exclusive from 2015, was actually supposed to kick off a whole trilogy. Ru Wirasuria, the co-founder of Ready at Dawn and creative director on the game, spilled the beans in a French interview. He said there were plans for 2 more games, The Order 1891 and The Order 1899. The sequel, 1891, was already in early development when it got cancelled. They wanted it to have multiplayer and way bigger fights, like with dozens and dozens of enemies. Funny thing is, multiplayer was actually planned for the first game, but got cut because of budget issues and to keep the first game focused. So, they pushed multiplayer to the second game, which never happened. Even the story for the third game, 1899, was mapped out, so this was definitely a serious plan. But after The Order 1886, Ready at Dawn switched gears. They made a game called Deformers in 2017, then moved into VR with Oculus Rift games. Oculus Studios bought them in 2020, but after that, they only released Lone Echo 2 in 2021. Unfortunately, the studio hit some rough patches, layoffs in 2023, and then they shut down completely in 2024, so that trilogy dream died with them. What do you think about The Order 1886 being meant as a trilogy? Would you have liked to see those sequels? Here's the drama around Mind's Eye, the upcoming action-adventure game from Build-A-Rocket-Boy, led by former GTA producer Leslie Benzies. The game's dropping on June 10th for PS5, Xbox Series, and PC, and they just released a trailer showing off cool stuff like creating your own missions in-game. But here's the thing, people's reactions so far haven't been great. Some early feedback online called Mind's Eye a broken mess, full of bugs, with enemy fights that felt shallow. Ouch. Now, Mark Gerhard, the co-CEO of Build-A-Rocket-Boy, dropped a bomb on the Mind's Eye Discord. When someone asked if the negative reviews might be paid for by someone, he straight up said 100%. He even hinted there's a concerted effort by folks who don't want Leslie or the studio to succeed. According to him, bots and repeated negative comments are flooding any content they put out. Gerhard didn't say exactly who's behind it, but he made it clear it's a targeted campaign to trash the game and the studio. Eurogamer tried to get a comment from Build-A-Rocket-Boy and IO Interactive, but no further details came out. If you want to know more, there's a good interview with the assistant game director Adam Whiting talking about how Mind's Eye aims to bring back tight, cinematic gameplay from the old Rockstar days. So the team is clearly aiming high, but the pre-release backlash is definitely heating up. Here's what's up with PS Plus Essential for June 2025. This month, subscribers get 4 games instead of the usual 3. That's a nice surprise. First off, there's The Final Shape. If you don't see it available in your region yet, just hang tight. Sony rolls out PS Plus games gradually, and the PlayStation Store updates at set times. Also, to play the Final Shape add-on, you'll need to have the free-to-play base game installed first. The Final Shape update adds a new story campaign, 3 new supers, a fresh destination, new weapons and armor, plus access to the current episode in the game's timeline. Sounds like a solid package. Besides that, June's lineup also includes NBA 2K25, Alone in the Dark, and Bomb Rush Cyberpunk. The last 3 games will drop on June 3rd, the first Tuesday of the month, as usual. So yeah, June is looking pretty good for Essential subscribers, with that extra game on top. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt just turned 10 years old. Can you believe it? To celebrate this massive milestone, Microsoft dropped a special edition Xbox controller inspired by the game, and fans went nuts for it. When Witcher 3 first launched back in 2015, it wasn't just another game release. It was a major moment that pushed the whole Witcher franchise into mainstream pop culture. Sure, the books and previous games had their fans, but Witcher 3 brought Geralt and his world to millions in a way no one expected. Since then, the franchise has exploded in all sorts of directions. You've got the Netflix live action series that's already hit 5 seasons, animated shows, comics, and tons of spin-offs expanding the lore and keeping fans hooked. But the biggest news is, of course, that The Witcher 4 is officially on the way. CD Projekt Red announced it at the 2024 Game Awards, and gamers everywhere lost their minds. fans. This isn't just a sequel, it's the next chapter in a saga millions have loved for over a decade. Now, about that special edition controller, when it dropped, it sold out in seconds. Unfortunately, like with a lot of these limited items, scalpers grabbed a bunch, making it tough for true fans to get their hands on one. It's frustrating, but it also just shows how much The Witcher 3 still means to people. Even after 10 years, it's a game that's still selling, still drawing in new players, and still being celebrated. On the topic of the sequel, The Witcher 4 won't have Geralt as the main character anymore. Instead, CIRI, the powerful badass character we all know and love, steps into the spotlight. Geralt will still be part of the story, but more in a supporting role. We don't yet know which other characters from Witcher 3 will be back, but fans are already buzzing about who might show up. This switch to CIRI as lead is a huge deal. It opens up a fresh perspective while staying true to the world's rich lore. The timeline for Witcher 4's release is still pretty far off. Rumors suggest a 2027 or even 2028 launch, possibly timed with next-gen Xbox and PlayStation consoles. CD Projekt Red itself confirmed they don't plan to release it by the end of 2026. On top of all that, the reveal trailer for Witcher 4 gave us a dark, atmospheric glimpse of what's to come. Even without a full plot synopsis, it's clear the game will pack a punch with action, drama, and the deep storytelling fans expect. Plus, with CIRI leading the charge, the game could explore new themes and storylines that were only hinted at before. If you've been wondering why Returnal's player count suddenly shot up on PS5, it's all thanks to a killer patch that dropped recently for the PS5 Pro. This patch basically gave the game a huge visual upgrade. Think 2.5 times more pixels, making it one of the best-looking games on the Pro so far. Even though there are still some bugs here and there, fans are loving this fresh shine on an already amazing game. According to data from over 3.4 million active PlayStation Network accounts, Returnal's player count jumped a massive 97% week on week after the patch dropped on April 30th, 2025. That's almost double the players. Some of that is probably people replaying it because their PS5 Pro just got a new reason to dive back in, but it's likely many are new players firing up Returnal for the first time on their new consoles. What's cool is this bump mainly comes from PS5 Pro owners who hadn't played Returnal yet. Since the patch is Pro-specific, it's like a fresh launch for those players. Housemarque's next game, Saros, isn't coming until 2026, so if you're craving more Returnal action, this upgraded version is your best bet. Plus, this patch also improves quality of life stuff, like better ways to pause long runs without risking progress, which was a huge pain point before. If you're a PS Plus subscriber and haven't tried Returnal yet, now's a great time. The community is buzzing, and it's easily one of the best games you can get on the service. The gameplay is tight, the visuals are stunning on PS5 Pro, and the whole experience just feels revitalized. So, have you jumped back into Returnal after the patch? What's your favorite thing about the PS5 Pro upgrade? Drop your thoughts. I'm tempted to dive back in myself before Death Stranding 2's sequel arrives. This story isn't just some gaming news. It's gonna actually change how you experience games going forward. For the past 5 years, there's been this huge behind-the-scenes battle shaking up the entire games industry. It's Apple versus Epic Games, and it's all about fairness and who controls what when it comes to buying stuff inside games. Here's the kicker. Apple just lost a major legal battle, but not because Epic outsmarted them or pulled some crazy move. Nope, Apple lost because, according to the judge, their top leadership straight up lied under oath. Tim Cook, Apple's CEO, apparently chose poorly when he ignored court orders. That's a big deal, like really big. So how did this all start? Tim Sweeney, the head of Epic, decided years ago that Apple and Google's control over their app stores was basically a monopoly. He said their 30% cut was unfair and they shouldn't be able to force devs to only sell through their platforms. Epic took a bold step. They gave Fortnite players a way to buy in-game currency directly from Epic, skipping Apple and Google's cut. Apple and Google freaked out and booted Fortnite from their stores. Exactly what Epic wanted. Epic was ready to fight. Google's case went well for Epic. Evidence came out showing shady deals and unfair practices, so Google got slapped with new rules and opened up its store more. Apple's fight was a whole different beast. Initially, Epic got crushed. They couldn't prove Apple was a monopoly except one win. They forced Apple to stop blocking developers from telling users about cheaper outside store payment options. Apple fought that ruling tooth and nail for 3 years, refusing to comply. That angered the judge so much she slapped them with a new injunction for contempt of court, and now Apple might even face criminal charges. The judge wasn't having any of Apple's tricks, calling their behavior gross miscalculation and insubordination. She laid down some clear rules. No fees on purchases outside the app, no blocking or tricking users away from outside payment options, no scaring customers into staying with Apple's system. Basically, Apple's anti-competitive moves are officially banned. Apple has started to comply, at least on paper, but you can bet they're doing it as grudgingly as possible. Meanwhile, the rest of the industry is buzzing because this ruling means big changes. Developers can finally offer alternative payment methods, subscriptions can be managed better, and prices could get fairer. Spotify, Kindle, Patreon, they're all celebrating. Epic's not stopping either. Their web store is now dropping fees to zero on the first $1 million of revenue starting this June, a huge win for devs. They're also offering players up to 20% rewards on purchases, basically throwing down the gauntlet to Apple. And here's a wild bit. Tim Sweeney said Fortnite could be back on app stores in weeks if Apple plays nice and rolls out these changes worldwide. But Apple just blocked Fortnite's submission anyway. So the fight's still on. This whole drama isn't just happening in the US. Europe's been cracking down on Apple and Google for anti-competitive behavior too, hitting them with massive fines and forcing more openness. It's clear the tide is turning against these giant walled gardens. Now sure, Tim Sweeney has his own interests here. His company stands to benefit big time from these changes. But that doesn't take away from the fact that this battle is a win for gamers and developers. Breaking down these walls means more choice, better prices, and a fairer market. So yeah, after this, gaming really will be different. The way you buy stuff, how devs sell their games, even how much you pay could all change for the better. And honestly, I'm here for it. This one's a real gut punch for a lot of folks. EA just dropped some heavy news. They're canceling the Black Panther game and shutting down Cliffhanger Games. Yep, the studio behind it completely. This came straight from an internal email sent by EA Entertainment president Laura Meal. She framed it as part of a bigger plan to sharpen focus and concentrate creative energy on what EA thinks are their best growth opportunities, with Star Wars leading the pack. So what's going on here? Along with the Black Panther cancellation and closing Cliffhanger, EA's also laying off some people in their mobile and central teams. They haven't said how many exactly, but sources say it's less than the 300 layoffs they did last month at Respawn and FanCare teams. Still, any layoffs suck, and EA claims they're trying to place people elsewhere in the company, but you know how that usually goes. EA's new game roadmap is pretty narrow now. Battlefield, The Sims, Skate, Apex Legends, and Star Wars are their main bets going forward. They're still backing the Iron Man game being made at Motive, as well as a third Star Wars Jedi game, and BioWare's working on the next Mass Effect. But Black Panther, that's out. Here's where it gets messy. Black Panther was part of a 3-game licensing deal between EA and Marvel, which included Iron Man and a third unannounced title. Cliffhanger Games was a brand new studio formed in 2023 by some big talent, including folks who made Middle-earth, Shadow of Mordor, and Shadow of War. And it was headed by Kevin Stevens. No relation, but funny coincidence. They were developing Black Panther as a single-player, open-world action adventure. But despite the pedigree and promise, EA pulled the plug. Why? The brutal truth is licensing deals like this are crazy expensive. We've seen with recent leaks around Insomniac's Wolverine game that for every copy sold, about 30% goes straight to the license holder. In that case, Marvel/Disney. So if you're selling a $60 game, $20 instantly goes to Marvel. That means the publisher has to sell a ton more just to break even compared to making a game they own outright. Imagine you think the Black Panther game will sell, say, 5 million copies. Great, but with that licensing cut, EA would actually need to sell more, like 8 million copies, just to make back the money they poured in. If their internal forecasts showed the game wouldn't hit those numbers, canceling is cold, but makes financial sense. It's brutal math. Do you spend hundreds of millions more on a game unlikely to turn a profit or cut losses now? Also, licensing contracts sometimes have clauses that add pressure. If you don't hit sales goals, you risk losing rights or paying penalties. So the stakes are high. Then there's the question of quality. We know little about Black Panther's gameplay or visuals because EA never showed much publicly, but rumors swirl that internal playtests or early demos may not have landed well. There's a pattern at EA where bad feedback leads to sudden leadership changes. Jade Raymond leaving after poor reception to another project is a prime example. Maybe something similar happened with Black Panther behind the scenes, and EA decided it wasn't worth fighting to fix. Let's not forget the human side of this. Cliffhanger Games was founded by some seriously talented devs many who came from successful studios like Monolith. They had 2 years of work on this project, only to have the rug pulled out. It's rough, leaving a stable job to start fresh, only to have it all vanish so quickly. It's also a reminder of how cutthroat the industry can be. Even with big names and licenses, games can get canned if the business math doesn't add up or internal confidence wanes. So many promising projects die this way, out of public sight. On the flip side, EA says they're doubling down on Star Wars, and there's chatter they're reorganizing teams to push Battlefront 3 sooner. But if you expect it to feel like Battlefront 2, which had its own troubled launch and monetization mess, you might want to temper expectations. All in all, EA is trimming the fat and betting big on franchises they trust to bring big returns. Black Panther didn't make the cut. Cliffhanger Games is no more. It's a harsh reminder that for every game announced, a dozen more quietly die behind closed doors. Sometimes it's not about what could be cool or creative, but what's profitable and safe. What do you think? Was Black Panther doomed by the licensing costs? Did EA make the right call? Drop your thoughts. I'm curious where you land on this one. Alright, so people are really digging Tainted Grailfall of Avalon, or at least games like it that feel a bit like Scrolls or classic RPGs. If you're new here, consider subscribing because I'm diving deep into what makes this game stand out. Now, before I jump into the usual Bethesda-style open world stuff, I gotta say, the combat here is where this game really tries to do its own thing. Full disclosure, I'm not the biggest fan of the melee combat. It's kinda that bouncy, finicky style you'd find in Bethesda games, and honestly, it's not really my vibe. But what I do love, the character building and the magic system. The magic especially is flashy and super fun. You're dodging, weaving, and blasting spells, building up status effects, and it all just clicks. What really pulled me in was the summoning system. This game lets you call in all sorts of creatures, from corpse eaters to skeletons, to fight alongside you. The catch? They each have their own health bars that show up above yours, and summoning them eats into your mana pool. So you can't just spam summons, you gotta balance it. This game is way tougher than your average Bethesda-style RPG. The game lets you set up 4 weapon loadouts, so switching between Ember spells, Ice spells, and summoning spells was seamless. One spell even lets you zap your summons to heal yourself, which is wild and adds a ton of battlefield control. If you're a mage fan like me, this magic system is way deeper and more interesting than your typical Elder Scrolls fireball spam. But if you're all about melee, I wonder if you'll enjoy it as much, since the game hits hard and punishing without a solid parry game. The dodge system works really well though. You get these great invincibility frames and it feels smooth when timed right. Like, okay, they're attacking, dodge now, get out of the way. It's satisfying and really necessary. Leveling feels classic too, like Oblivion. As you use skills, your XP bar fills up and you level when you rest. If you've played Oblivion, this will feel really familiar and nice. Now, for exploration, this is where the game really shines. You can play in third person, though it's an accessibility option added late in development. They're upfront about it not being fully polished because the game was built for first person, but it's a cool touch for folks who like that perspective for roaming or fighting. The world is huge and packed. When you hit your first town, you're bombarded with quests, side missions, and NPCs that are all fully voiced. Some voice acting is top-notch, others a bit less so, but overall, it's solid and adds a lot of life. One thing I really like is how quests can branch. You might go to a location for one mission and discover a hidden dungeon or side quest that pulls you deeper in. The story itself is pretty intriguing. It revolves around King Arthur and Avalon, a land that was once peaceful but is now falling apart. As you play, Arthur reflects on the past, and you gather shards of his essence to piece together what happened. There's some choice and consequence sprinkled in. For example, one early choice could lead to getting knocked out or helped by an NPC, depending on your dialogue choices. The endings to quests might be the same, but character reactions change, which is a nice touch. If you're craving a big fantasy RPG with a twist and haven't checked this one out yet, it's definitely worth your time. Let me know if you're playing or planning to, and what you think so far. So here's the scoop on PlayStation stuff this summer. There's a pretty decent price drop happening on PlayStation consoles, peripherals, and bundles, but heads up, it's only for a short window from May 28th to June 11th. So don't get too excited thinking all the recent price hikes are gone. This is just a limited summer deal. The PlayStation 5 Pro is $50 off. The PlayStation VR 2 also drops $50, and both versions of the PS5 Slim, digital and disc, are $100 cheaper. Oh, and PlayStation Plus gets a nice 33% discount, but only if you're new or upgrading your subscription. Plus, games are on sale too, like Alien Rogue Incursion, which is half off right now. I'm eyeing saying that one, but honestly, I've got way too many games sitting in my backlog. Still, it's hard to resist a good deal, right? I'm hoping I actually remember to play it someday. Seeing PlayStation hardware go on sale instead of going up in price, like Xbox has been doing lately, feels pretty refreshing. Hopefully, this hints at a smoother ride for the PlayStation 6 launch. Like, fingers crossed, it won't be insanely expensive, but we'll have to wait and see how that all shakes out. Now, diving into some juicy tech news, there's talk about a big update coming to the PlayStation 5 Pro, specifically for playing classic games from the PS3, PS2, PS1, and even PSP era. According to a fairly reliable source called Moore's Law is Dead, Sony is working on improving the PS5 Pro's PSSR, that's PlayStation Super Resolution tech, to upscale these older games better. Right now, PSSR only kicks in for games with a base resolution of at least 864p, which means a lot of classic titles running at 720p or lower don't get that boost. They get upscaled with older methods, which aren't as sharp or clean. The rumor is Sony might update PSSR, so it works on those lower res games too, making them look and run better on the PS5 Pro. Sounds great in theory, but remember, this is still just speculation from a site interpreting that source. PSSR has always been added game by game, not as a blanket system, so it's unclear if Sony will inject it into their emulators or something else. Speaking of emulation, there's been some fresh info about PS3 backward compatibility on PS5. A guy named Ryan on Twitter, who's had hits and misses before, is saying Sony's PS3 emulator is almost ready. Apparently, about 15 games currently work, with a couple already running above native resolution and frame rates. The target is to officially announce it by the end of this year and roll it out in 2026, but it'll only be for PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 5 Pro, not PlayStation 4. Sony apparently dropped plans for multiple emulators, which would have helped compatibility, and settled on one that's best overall. That should make things smoother, but maybe slower on game adoption. The idea is that Sony's waiting until most players have moved to PS5 before pushing PS3 emulation widely, which makes sense since PS4 support on PlayStation Plus is ending in 2026. It'd be amazing if games like Killzone 2 could run at 4K 60 frames per second on PS5 via emulation, but honestly, that's probably wishful thinking without a remaster. Still, just having classic titles playable natively on PS5 will be a win. If you want to be ahead of all the gaming leaks and news, specifically PlayStation news, time for you to subscribe. And as always, a like on the video is very much appreciated.